We see them, we know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think make sure it's not in read. Okay. Another one is.
Or for dry, I'll take asphalt. Which is a wide asphalt, but then along Lake Shore Drive, it says asphalt pass, well, it's like. I know there's a lot of vegetation for over, I wonder what's supposed to be white, but it's all vegetation going into it. Yeah.
We'll have just.
Actually sent Joe Hopper, email asking that.
Yes.
Haven't seen anything from them since.
We have kind of these.
Yeah.
Different topics. So I think that we should have it ready for the-
I don't know.
You're trying to get this word out, but these things.
Right.
We'll see. But, yeah, so. Yeah, there's these grant sliding presentations that are kind of provided. It's like that, so. You know.
That project was it like going to be rough where they wanted to dig a well. And get it commercial.
Oh, the Edmund Plumbing one.
That's good.
So, yeah.
That one is.
Besides that,
I don't know, that's supportive of the option. Or basically provide the guy some, like sewer. When they need to make that connection.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna get distracted.
It doesn't make sense. Or how far.
I go off all day, but like, go planning. Go to the dentist. They're just
You could apply the same sort of 200 feet, we do sewer. but-
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, there's.
Yeah, I just have to,
Oh,
do some-
I have to get these together.
You have the power. So those are the projects. Evaporates.
Maybe.
And then Brian is on flat. He actually has the one about stone. His expires.
discussion on our meeting schedule. Like how to
40 jobs.
Does that make sense?
I will.
He's gonna let, if he doesn't let it die, just to spike it.
Well, yeah.
It seems like you might see that. Yeah, it will.
Keep giving them polite reminders. Touch base with him again.
Yeah,
next
but
year.
that, I think.
I'll do that usually.
I think it's
Brian. Too big a project.
It's a lot, it's a lot for him.
Everything about it.
It's a lot, but even everything's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of it, just.
It was tough.
Transportation.
This should come in through Teams, it
It'll
should
come-
come in through, send for the Zoom.
You can say the national anthem.
Start saying.
I know. I feel like it's actually a spicy.
I guess the whole. Now you have to.
Oh, it's.
Yeah, I.
Like that's.
Yeah, that's, dealer's choice.
I like to be consistent.
Okay.
Works, right? There's a middle school teacher and she's on the, she's doing something school.
Yeah.
Jen, we have to do the whole year, the middle school this year. Today, Thursday, we used to do, yes, they thought it was super fun, they came. Oh. And they hooked up, and so she hooked up board, she's like. Roll calling on her doing. And she got her down and.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the time's so short, and so. Now, like, they can stay for today and then I'll call their parents.
Yeah.
Because if they want to be in school, like,
100%.
yeah, she said, I'm never gonna go away.
That's so. We
Yeah.
get,
That would not have crossed my mind.
there's a lot more. Especially in middle school kids, and the last week of school is hard. for them.
Because they're having to give up the social.
It's so, it's just a lot of things, they don't, a lot of kids, they don't want. Right? There's a lot going on. Yeah.
I know it is. Although it does myself.
Maybe representation in television.
And I was regulated as. a
Yeah.
Half of the families get into school, except he wants to be in my house.
He's not really a wall, yeah, go on.
Now.
If you want an agenda, there's one up here on the podium.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
You can grab one right off the
Oh my
podium.
God.
Yeah, you see it. Well, I guess I'm very big.
For you.
Doing her, she what you saw, going through.
Good.
that system.
It's been busy. Yes, the new, uh-huh. They used it at city council.
Yes, but I don't have any display that we can keep going until I get that.
Right. Well, I'd like to call to order the June 3rd meeting of the planning commission. We can all rise to sing. Pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Commissioner Morton,
Here.
Commissioner Packard here, Commissioner Newer here, Commissioner Jennifer Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Holt, and Commissioner Huxford. And we'll hold on to see if Linda is able to join us here in a short time. All right, and move on to any guest business. Well, let's move on to the first action item. It's approval of the minutes. A pretty good opportunity to look at the May 1st minutes. Questions, amendments?
It's on that. I'd make a motion to move.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion moves. We'll move on to discussion item one. That's a transportation and capital facilities discussion. Turn it over to Planner Levitan.
You just want to get the deal and just do it directly since she's not even asked.
Yeah.
We can.
So Yeah.
Am I able to?
Yeah, plug this in.
Staff is just making some IT adjustments here, and we'll start shortly.
The new interface to manage the.
Yes.
That is.
My apologies.
Oh, no, yeah.
We had it all working at like 5:40.
Right.
And then I went up, had my dinner and came back and, it was on this screen and I can't get it off of that. I'm trying to contact our IT director, so advise me.
So in the meantime, David's go ahead and casting from his own computer.
Let's see if we can do this. Seems to be doing it.
There we go, you're up. Yay.
Okay. All right, so are we on? All right, so thank you, commissioners. David Levitan, senior planner. So we are here tonight to, it's a little bit of a different format than what we've done in recent meetings, discussing some of the topics for the comprehensive plan. As we got into the discussion of the transportation and capital facilities elements, we wanted to provide a little bit of a higher level overview, kind of just that educational foundation for kind of the role of these elements and how they function, how they feed into different programs in the city. So just for some quick introductions, we have Daniel Hendricks and John Pascal from Transpo Group, who are consultants helping us to develop the transportation element. Kind of hand in hand with that is development of our capital facilities plan, development of our capital projects list, which we'll get into in a little bit more detail as part of the presentation. But I'm just going to give a kind of a high level overview of how this fits into the comprehensive plan update process, and then let John and Daniel take the lead on that.
City agent Kim Click is here.
She is.
Jen,
Yeah, thank you.
she can answer some technical questions later tonight. Those come up.
All right, so just a little bit on our agenda tonight. So I'm just going to provide very high level. All right. You may need to mute your. Yes. Okay. Still like.
A stadium.
Now's when we need to think nationally. Now it works, all comes together.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Hello.
Hey, put that on. We'll just have to talk about
There, there we go.
All right, so just a little bit on our agenda. So general comprehensive plan update process. Then we have a variety of different sections here: roadway classifications, active transportation, future conditions. So I would note to the Planning Commission and also to any members of the public that there will be some natural kind of breakpoints between topic areas. So those would probably be a good opportunity to ask any questions, direct those to city staff, city engineer, to our consultants from Transpo. Happy to answer any questions before we move on to a future topic. So yeah, just
providing a little bit of information. We've gone over this a number of times in previous meetings, but basically what drives the comprehensive plan update is our need to plan for our 2044 growth targets. So basically the 2024 to 2044, the 20-year growth horizon. The city's anticipated to add between 2020 and 2044 about 9,600 people, need to accommodate about 3,200 jobs and about just under 5,000 housing units. We'll be discussing land use and housing at our June 17th meeting. So we'll get into more detail on that, but we mostly just wanted to note that basically that projected growth is what we feed into our transportation model. That's then reflected in some of the capital projects that are needed. Basically, how do we provide that concurrency between land use and transportation? How do we accommodate projected growth and make all of the necessary improvements to our transportation infrastructure, to our other city infrastructure, such as parks, roadways, and city facilities, stormwater infrastructure, all of that. Basically, how can we make sure that we are accommodating all of the projected growth in a responsible way? So this just goes into it a little bit more. If you look at that, so there's the land use plan to accommodate growth that's then fed into the transportation model, and what comes out of that is transportation projects and programs to support that land use plan. And then we need to figure out the capital projects that are going to help us to accomplish that, and then how we're going to pay for them. So that's what goes into our capital facilities plan. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Transpo, let them kind of lead a little bit more on the details of updating the transportation element, and then we'll get into the individual sections.
Fantastic. Thanks, David. So you can see here on the screen, what is the process for the transportation element? How do we get through this project? How do we get to that project list that David mentioned? So you can see here the sort of five key steps that it takes. The first is evaluating existing transportation system conditions and issues. So we're looking at the existing network, the existing transportation facilities that are in the field today, and seeing how those operate, what the needs are, what issues there are currently in the network. Then we move on and we prepare travel forecasts. We'll look at, okay, in the future with that projected growth, how is our existing network expected to operate? And with that, the additional traffic, what additional needs are there going to be? Next, we define and update the multimodal improvement list. So that's that project list that David mentioned, looking at, okay, based off those needs, what improvements need to be made to the roadway system. In addition to that, we'll update the transportation policies, the policies and goals. So those were included as part of the package in today's meeting. And then finally, all of that information is wrapped up together in a nice final plan that outlines the goals, policies, and future vision for the transportation network for the next foreseeable future. And with that, I think that's sort of just the background to lay the foundation of where we're going today. So we'll jump into the roadway classifications. So the roadway classifications for the city, that's determining how each of the roadways in the city is going to operate, what that purpose is going to be. So that each of the roadway classifications is determined based on the roadway context. So we looked at the roadways within the city to figure out what sorts of needs each of the roadways is going to serve. So you see here, there's four main types of roadways that are listed. There are actually 5. I'll get to that last one at the end. But first, we have those freeways and expressways. Those are SR9, SR92, and SR204. So those are sort of the regional washout facilities. Those provide throughput through the city and provide that regional connectivity to the larger surrounding area beyond the city boundary. Next, we have our major arterials. So those are roadways that provide still a fairly regional connectivity, but really connecting those regional washout routes to sort of major land uses and areas within the city. So that includes 20th Street, southeast and southern portion of the city. Next, we're looking at minor arterials, and those are providing connectivity through the city. So that's providing connectivity between the neighborhoods within the city. So this is going to be sort of more of those
main thoroughfares through the city that don't have that sort of wide roadway width. So you can see on the map that there's a variety of roadways within the city, Lundin Parkway, 20th Street, Northeast, as well as Gray Road right up there. So these roadways provide pretty strong connectivity to major areas within the city, but don't provide that sort of wide arterial or super arterial that is provided by some of those other roadways. Next, we have the collectors. Those are providing connectivity through the neighborhoods. So those are getting from those major and minor arterials to those more residential streets. So those provide connectivity within neighborhoods and get you closer to your final destination, whether that be home or wherever it may be. And finally, the last category or roadway classification that is not actually listed on this list is the local streets. So those are where all your homes are. Those are providing direct access to those final destinations. And so those are all the roadways up here that are shown on the map in white, but aren't actually designated on the list of roadways. And so that is a high level overview of the roadway classification. So if there's any questions or comments on that, we're happy to take them now.
Well, I guess my only disagreement is that Machias Road, I would consider a major arterial, but it's only a 2-lane road, so I guess the main distinction is that a major arterial is just wider.
Right. So yes, so these functional classifications will tie back in with the ultimate right-of-way widths and designations in the EDS. So we're sort of looking at balancing those together to figure out what is the appropriate designation for the roadways based off the number of lanes and width of the facilities.
Because functionally with Machias it connects up the slope.
Yeah, it's more of a regional, given that region.
And you didn't mention 92, so 204, 9, does 92 not factor in?
92 should be one of the freeway expressways.
So you
Yeah,
just- Okay,
I think, yeah, if I see correctly, yeah, that should be in that maroon color.
I was just making sure that it wasn't left out of your intro for a reason.
No, correct, yeah, that is just
Thank you.
skipped over that one, thank you.
No worries.
When the previous slide, you don't have to go to the previous slide, it showed your first bullet point or item was assessing the issues, right, the problem points. How, to what granularity do you assess those? All the way down to the collector level, even the city roads? I mean, how deep do you guys go when you're looking at those issues?
Oh, I was gonna say, so we've looked at a number of intersections throughout the city.
Okay.
So we're really mainly focusing on sort of the major intersections and roadways within the city.
Okay.
A lot of those collector and our local streets have sufficient capacity and low enough volumes that they don't really have too many operational concerns. So the focus of this study is more of a citywide overall overview to sort of key into those sort of bigger problem areas. All right, perfect. All right, so we want the active transportation network. So again, this is that map that we were previously looking at that sort of focuses on the vehicular throughput for the city. Now I want to touch on the facilities for pedestrians and bicyclists. So developing the active transportation vision for the city is really building off a lot of the previous planning work that has been done by the city. So you can see we have a number of plans listed here, the Trails Master Plan, the ADA Transition Plan, as well as the 4 sub-area plans that are listed on the screen. So the projects and findings and networks identified in those plans and the studies are all being incorporated into the active transportation network that we're developing and will be presenting as part of the transportation element. So as part of this process, we'll be comparing the existing transportation network with the planned improvements coming from those studies to identify gaps in the network to figure out, okay, what projects need to be implemented to really provide the full connectivity throughout the city for pedestrians and bicyclists. And so you can see here, this is sort of the initial data collection step. This map on the right shows the existing sidewalks and connecting paths through the city. So in orange, you'll see all the locations and all the streets where sidewalks are currently provided. In addition, there's some purple dashed lines, which represent planned projects in the city. There's some reddish pink highlighting, which demonstrates sort of the school watershed. So the areas within close proximity to the local schools that show where we're expecting the highest level of pedestrians with students walking to and from campuses. So then the analysis that is sort of shown on this map goes into figuring out, okay, what does the existing network look like? And is used to sort of set the foundation of, okay, where are the gaps in the pedestrian and bicycle network going to be? And so with that, we'll get into the next slide, which shows the vision for the city, for the pedestrian, or for the active transportation system. So within this map, we've identified 3 networks. So the first, so we have a primary and secondary network as well as a trail network. So you'll see on the screen here, we have definitions for what is a primary versus secondary network. So the primary network is really going to be the backbone for the active transportation system. So this is primarily going to be on sort of arterial and the more direct routes. So this is really providing that connectivity to your major commercial centers that are going to draw a lot of trips. So these, like I mentioned, these are usually along arterials and collectors and provide that more direct connectivity. The secondary network is meant to support the primary network. So it's providing connectivity along what can be lower speed, lower volume, vehicular volume roadways, and often provide a more comfortable walking environment, but they may not provide as direct of connectivity. So you'll see on this map, some of those secondary routes are those roadways that ring the lake. And so a lot of these roadways have been identified as being important for pedestrian connectivity, but aren't those direct routes that we'll see on a lot of the more arterial facilities. I will also note that down there at the bottom, we state that the primary and secondary network do not define the type of pedestrian facility that is designated or that is identified as necessary for each roadway. So that gets back to the roadway standards. So those roadway standards dictate what those facilities should be, which would be sidewalks on both sides, multi-use path, whatever it may be. That is not defined by this network. It just defines, okay, what is this roadway intended to function as? Is it primary, providing that good direct connectivity, or a secondary, which is going to be supportive of that? All right. And then I believe that is the end of this. Oh, sorry. One more slide on this active transportation. So as part of the comp plan update requirements, multimodal level service standards are required to be implemented as part of the transportation element. So this process that is shown on the screen here gives an overview of what that process is. So the first box here is existing active transportation facilities. That's what we looked at 2 slides ago, with what the existing sidewalk network is looking like right now in the city. The next is to develop that future plan, that future vision for the city. So that is that blue map that we looked at on the previous slide. That's defining, okay, what do we want our network to look like once we implement this projects. After that, we compare those 2 maps to determine where the gaps in the network are. Okay, what does we want our network to look like versus what is currently out there? Where are those gaps? Where do we need to go in the holes to provide the needed connectivity? After looking at those gaps, then we develop the standards for what we're looking for in the actual facilities that are going on each roadway. So this is something that we're currently in the process of determining and developing with the project team here. So we're finalizing that right now. Then once those standards are set, we look at what is the level of service of the system. Does this meet those standards? Is it deficient in some places, and where we need to figure out where those improvements need to be made? Finally, the last step is to identify what those improvements are. So figuring out what projects need to be constructed to fill those gaps, and how do we prioritize those projects, figuring out which of those projects needs to be implemented first. All right, now we're at the end of the active transportation section. So we can take some questions and discussion here.
So the city council meeting tomorrow is supposed to look at, the 91st, I think, from Market up through wherever that is, right? So, yeah, is that something that, well, I'm assuming you guys did that study as well, or was that done by a separate engineering firm, or?
That was done by a separate engineering firm. That was a project that the council had asked to bring forward more as an economic development project, but it also has an active transportation component.
Got it. So I'm assuming they're aligned in terms of fit, form, function, goals, objectives, all those kinds.
Yeah, so like we we're mentioning, a lot of the projects that are going on right now, those are being incorporated into work. So it's taking the previous work that has been done and sort of incorporating that to what's implemented moving forward.
So, when we're looking at the primary versus secondary, are these the active transportation type? This is how pedestrians and cyclists alike would utilize this. Hypothetically, is it based on current use or like the prospective usage?
So the vision is for future use. I will note here that this active transportation sort of focuses more on the pedestrian, given that additional work in the future maybe need to be done for the bicycle network. But this vision is looking forward. What are we wanting our vision and our connection to be for pedestrian bikes?
Okay, when it comes to the secondary network around the lake, and then you look at the real-time existence, there's no sidewalks around the lake. I mean, there's very little public access to the lake, much less sidewalk access to the lake. How though is that? How is that really remedied? Is this just, like mass installation of sidewalks? I look along, East Lake Stevens Road. Are there variances or there easement, like public utility easements that the city is able to utilize to provide that throughfare? Because when I think of north-south from where I live here in Northeast Lake Stevens, to get to the south end of the lake, East Lake Stevens Road is the easiest way to do that. But there is zero way to safely do that. So is this, how does that work with utility easements, all that kind of stuff? Is that not?
So that's probably out of their scope, but with the capital facilities element, there's a priority ranking that goes on as we decide what goes from the 20-year to the 6-year. So there are lots of projects and we recognize and occur, the need for the continuation around the lake, but you also have to look for opportunity where you can actually, as they're saying, get more people through those sections on primary routes than secondary routes, which can often be done in other projects and probably less expensively. So I won't kid you, putting sidewalks around the lake, that would be the most expensive transportation project in the city. And being able to piggyback on other people's easements, may or may not be able to do that. So we definitely recognize that need and have recognized that plans working towards that and some segments identified, but it will continue to be a long-term project and build out.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Sure. So, this kind of goes back to the functional classification map that we showed on an earlier slide. I think that all the roads around the lake are classified as collectors, so those are for engineering, design, and development standards. So as properties do develop around the lake, at a minimum, they are required to dedicate the right of way that aligns with our collector standards that typically provides for 50 to 60 feet of right of way. We do have some exemptions in our code that some of these single family houses that develop are required to construct permanent improvements, such as widening the shoulder, constructing the sidewalk. But we are getting the adequate property to do that. And as director, right, that is a vision that we're interested in studying in the future and coming up with a road standard that might not take the whole 60-foot road and impact, all the properties around the lake, but it is visual if you want to accommodate vehicles and pedestrian bikes around the lake. So right now, it's currently set up that we're at least able to acquire the right of way dedication. So that will be one less barrier for us that we think about.
You say when the lots develop, so the lake is almost entirely, is completely developed. So when somebody tears down a house and builds a new house, because otherwise that's not going to get, I don't see that.
Yeah, I mean, that was what came to mind, and we had social instances where that picture, especially on the southeast, and the lake that, where it used to be part of the empty. Those are the instances that come to mind right now, most recently, they're looking at lots and thinking about the right way dedication and what frontage improvement kind of looks like. And once we get a couple of sections built out, then the additional lots develop. It'll be required to connect them and provide more of that network, but it is a good comment and request that I think it's something that would be a great benefit to the community. And we want to be mindful of that, but find the right balance where it's not like 40 feet sidewalks on both sides. Like, we don't need that vision either. So we the engineering department of public works is working on updating our engineering design development standards, which has specific road standards for different roadway classifications, and that was an idea that we had in different areas such as the tightness. Like we do have different looks and feels of roads throughout our city, which might all be classified as collectors, but it might be nice to have a road standard that's specific to the China industrial field versus vehicles and pedestrian travel around the lake. So I think that might be an opportunity where we could find a balance.
So I'm really interested in what you had to say about potentially innovative designs to, because I also had the Davises had the same question about that particular portion of the lake where the roadway bisects a lot of properties and they're privately held. And so that was really interesting to me that you said that there are potentially engineering solutions where you can look at the amount of roadway that exists and find different ways to use it so it's safe for cars and pedestrians. Interesting.
Yeah, it's something that we need to look into a little bit more, come up with some ideas and proposals for, and I'm interested in low impact stormwater design and wheels and alternative methods to do stormwater runoff. And multi-use paths, but yeah, ultimately finding the right balance. We don't want to build beautiful roads. Might not need sidewalks on both sides of the roads around the lake, but it might be nice to have a wide beach that's and pedestrian. So yeah, I think that's something that the planning department and the public works department is mindful of, and we're working on it, and we'd be happy to, once we have some ideas and proposals to come discuss them and get feedback. Definitely get feedback. This planning commission and our community and our developers, we have buy-off and vision in the home.
I think we talk all the time about trying to balance the needs of the community with private property rights. And so the idea of having innovative design solutions is awesome. I think we all really look forward to that.
If I may jump in, I love a good vision, and I've seen a lot of vision over the many years that I've lived here. But I also like being cost effective and doing things that we could do that have the most impact for the least amount of money. And I think that slowing people down is going to be the most cost effective way of making it so that our community is not only one community around the lake, but not being run over by cars as you're going around the lake. There's a car in the lake right now on South Lake Stevens Road. I was stopped on the way here because of it. I don't know what happened. I don't know why he's in the lake, but he is. And that's at 5:45 on a Monday night. So if you leave Costco, South Lake Stevens, before you get to Costco, you're at 35 miles an hour. You come through the roundabout, you're at 30 miles an hour. You come through the Tom Thumb intersection and you're at 25 miles an hour. So nobody that is going from Costco to down here realizes that you've changed a speed limit and they're at 35, which means they're driving 45. I mean, we all know it. You and I have talked about it many, many times. So I would suggest that along with the vision and along with everything we're doing with capital investments and the money that's being used and being sought after to try to build some of this stuff out, that we can do what we can now to make it a place that is going to be safer for when that vision comes to fruition. That is my plea to all of you, and I won't quit pleading that.
Yeah, I appreciate your comment. Yeah, that really speaks to just optimizing, right? Figuring cost-effective support, but also coming up with the right solution that's not just thinking about how to move vehicles as fast and directly as possible, thinking about traffic calming, narrowing the lanes, and also providing safe pedestrian and bike facilities.
I would be much more willing to continue running South Lake Stevens Road if there was a speed limit enforcement and notification of that. I don't have to have a sidewalk, because it's gonna be a long time till there's a sidewalk, just to be real. But, to make sure that you're safe alongside that road would go a long way. Oh, that's it.
Great, thank you. And now we'll get into some of the future conditions. So this we're gonna look at vehicular level of service, how the intersections are operating throughout the city currently and into the future. But then a brief overview on level of service, what is it? It's a measure of delay or a measure of how the roadway system is operating. It's graded on an A through F scale. So you can see here on the right, level of service A is really little delay, low congestion. And then when you get down to F, it's high delay, lots of congestion. So when we're looking at intersections, we're looking at average delay per vehicle as being the determining metric for what informs that level of service value. Next slide, yeah. And so here you can see, that might be a little bit tricky to see, but you can see the intersection level of service values throughout this. So on the left, you have your existing 2024 operations at these intersections. And on the right, you have it forecast out into the future based off those traffic forecasts that we mentioned based off of the housing and employment growth. So currently throughout the city, most intersections operate at a pretty good level of service, D or better. A couple of places where they are at failing E or F level of service is on those regional roadways, SR 204 and SR 92. Those are two-way stop control intersections. So just lots of east-west traffic on those roadways, making train movements to and from those bike-shared approaches difficult to make. So once we add in the additional traffic growth, this same trend continues for most of the intersections that are at those E and F level of service values are along those regional roadways. Again, SR 204, SR 92, and Machias Road. So again, we're looking at improvements at these locations to address these future concerns and potential operational conditions that may result in higher delays, potentially safety concerns at these locations. So those sorts of improvements can be changes to traffic control, adding signals, adding roundabouts, changes to channelization, access management. So these are all concepts that we're considering. Nothing has been finalized or set yet. These are just sort of the list of potential improvements that is being considered for these locations.
I would suggest one additional intersection to put on your list. That would be Cavallaro Road, southeast 20. That's the last intersection before you head down that way. And the morning, that's backed up, and then the afternoon, especially, there can be cars backed up all the way down to Highway 2 down. Wait, that one way. Part of that has to do with the slope of the hill. Right, that's part of the kind of get going, but maybe a different kind of intersection there would help continue that flow so that those cars don't have to stop on that steep hill.
Well,
Is there a reason that some of these major intersections are not covered at all? Like Lundin at Highway 9, anything around new roundabouts, anything on 9 at all?
Yeah.
But 92 is there and 204 is there?
So we try to avoid a lot of those major intersections on those washout facilities. So some of these, we're looking at some of those sort of minor intersections on the state facilities, but given that they're washout roadways, it's really a lot of washouts control and sort of their discretion on what improvements are made at those intersections. So again, a lot of those major intersections right there around SR 204, those are gonna have to be washout projects.
But 92 is on.
Right, yeah, so those are sort of more minor roadways where it's just stop control along the side street approaches. So those were just looked at just to provide some context. Where sort of a lot of the major intersections on SR9, a lot of those are going to be major walk-off. So we're just trying to look and identify from those potential locations where future conversations with Walshot need to be had on SR92.
And again, you're projecting to 2044. I would propose another glance at South Lake Stevens Road and Machias Cutoff at the base of the lake. As you're coming down South Lake Stevens Road heading south, and you're trying to take a left on the Machias Cutoff Road right there, that is impossible to do at certain times of the day. And will only get worse with all of the growth that's going on down the South Lake Stevens, all where they're clear cutting and putting in. So that choke point there, and then it's been brought up on a couple of the meetings earlier that where you come out from one of the new subdivisions, or will be coming out from the new subdivision onto South Lake Stevens Road where it tees with Davies. That is classified as a C right now. The base of the lake is at a B. I think that they're going to get into the orange here real soon. 2044 is, we're talking in the next probably 12, 18 months. I'm not joking.
Yeah, definitely, we'll take another look at those intersections.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Dana, can you just clarify, I think the city provide the TA studies that we had on the years with these development projects that are already under construction.
The traffic studies for, at these intersections, the ongoing projects in the city.
We do have more development that's currently under construction at the south end of the lake, like when you're Ivy and Vegas, which had traffic impact analysis that he completed that show projected vehicle demand that's associated with that new development. Was that incorporated in your analysis and forecasting, or did you maybe also, I guess if the land use is already projected to accommodate that density that was already accounted for in the calculations with the projection in terms of the vehicle movements and the level of service analysis?
Yeah, so those projects would have been included within the growth forecast that we put into the model that was used to develop these future volumes at the intersections. We would have to take a second look to go cross-reference the future forecast from those studies with the forecast that we have here shown on the screen. But we can certainly use, we do have those traffic studies. Okay.
But I guess in general,
The growth should align.
Also, I just wanted to mention with the level of service analysis, I think that, like Stevens Municipal Code dictates, the acceptable level of service. So I think that ours states that each of these critical intersections that we looked at the level of service A, B, C, all the way to D. To D, or that's why those are shown in green. And also, then we look at the PM peak hour. That is
really shown.
Yeah, so I know, some intersections probably get backed up with school drop off, pick up times in the morning hours. I think when it comes to traffic analysis and the level surface that's actually shown here on the maps. For our city code, that's typically, you can determine the but that's the PM peak hour, 2 hour window that's in our code, correct?
It's perfect.
Yeah, because I'll just get on my selfish soapbox. Yeah, running out 20th Street in the morning is, I don't see how that's not an F, like at least from that Caballero mid-high. And that gets brutal. I mean, we've got to have thousands of citizens spending hours just trying to get out. Now, I get that that may largely be based on the trestle and that needing to be expanded, and that's way outside of your scope. I get that, but yeah, some of these other intersections, anything we can do to lighten that up and make sure that it's not our city streets that are causing those issues. That's where I would like. Yeah, coming up on the way out. And then I do have a question in the top right corner, North Machias on the 2044 plan is F, E, and E. I guess what I thought I heard you say is the items that are F and E and D is where you're gonna spend your money. Do any of the other commissioners, or can you tell me why the projection is that that will be so bad? I don't know if I've ever had any traffic going up Old Machias Road. And yeah, there are other places in the city, I feel like, that have worse traffic than that. So I'm just curious if that's where we're gonna spend money to fix, why do we feel like that needs to be fixed?
Yeah, so those are operating at 4 levels of service just because those intersections, they're two-way stop control. So we're looking at the stop control approach, not the north-south movements along the roadway.
Okay,
So with increased traffic north-south along the roadway, those delays along the side street.
people trying to get onto the north-south main.
Yeah, that's gonna be longer. I will say that we will be balancing sort of needs at these locations with locations throughout the city. So we won't be spending all the money saying, okay, these are all D, E, and F, sure, throwing all the money at those locations. We'll be trying to determine cost-effective solutions at these locations. And given that they're two-way self-control intersections, we're trying to look at and find solutions that sort of maybe don't spend the most money because they do serve sort of a smaller number of trips, given that those are the two-way self-control. So we're balancing all of that.
I would, and again, my selfish soapbox, I own a business. I'm in the D, E, and F stage, and it's a trucking company. How sweet is that? And so, it's not only for residents, but it's commercial. And the businesses up there rely heavily being able to get in and out of that area. So I'm not saying that that was the reason, but, it is a choke point for our economic growth in that area.
And just as a segue to that, this is the projected 20-year growth, and we've just gone through an extensive planning process for the Lake Stevens Industrial Center. We are anticipating to accommodate a good amount of our employment growth within this area. It does need significant infrastructure improvements, so this does demonstrate that projected employment growth over the next 20 years would, result in deterioration of levels of service.
The comments. All right, I think I ran through all of these, so we'll move on to the final section, which is the improvement projects. So this slide here, let's give an overview of how those capital improvement projects are defined and actually implemented. So that the 20-year capital facilities plan, those includes the projects that accommodate the vision for the city. So that's the long list of all the projects in the city needs to accommodate that future 20-year growth. So at this stage of the process, the long-term needs for the city are identified and the funding needs to accommodate and construct those projects are identified. Then we bring those projects down into the 6-year capital improvement plan. So that is taking a more focused look at, so okay, what are the near-term needs and how do we prioritize some of those more important projects within the city? So at that stage, funding for those projects are identified funding sources, and a timeline is established for when those projects are going to be implemented and designed and constructed. And finally, the tip of the upside down pyramid here is the annual budget. So this is actually allocating the money to implement those projects on a year-by-year basis. So this is sort of getting to the final stage where those projects actually get designed and built. So that is the summary here of the process. I'll go to the next slide. So here on the right, we have a map depicting the 6-year CIP projects within the transportation projects within the city. So these are a number of different types of projects. A lot of them are sidewalk improvement projects. There is the Marysville Bayside Connector off-road trail project, as well as the 20th Street Main Street roundabout over here, right in the downtown area. So like the slide here says, this CIP project list is updated annually as part of the comprehensive plan docket. And as part of this, estimated costs and financing methods are identified for each of the projects. So even though they're not shown here, this CIP list, this includes not only transportation projects, but parks, city facilities, and stormwater projects. Those just have been mapped out here. And so these projects take and sort of implement and get closer to how these projects are built. So I think next Dave will run through some of these recent CIP projects.
Yeah, and it's not included on the slides, but we touched on it briefly. Basically, the process to get from the 20-year kind of long-range plan to the 6-year plan, the city has existing policies within the capital facilities element that include ranking criteria, where those are included within attachment 2. We are still looking at updating those slightly. So any comments as far as ranking criteria would be welcome from the Planning Commission. But basically, it factors in economic development, sustainability. We're looking at potentially incorporating some equity and sustainability ranking criteria as well. So I didn't go into detail on this. I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of transportation, parks, and other kind of capital facilities projects and how they do. So this example is 91st Avenue sidewalks. So was added to the 6-year and the 20-year plans several years back. Then basically you kind of work your way from the 20-year plan to the 6-year CIP, and then it needs to get funded in the actual budget. So this money has been allocated via city budget over the past several years, including in 2024. This is an example of a project that design started late last year, and actually the bids are due, I believe, next week. So that's just a good example of a project kind of going from the long-range plan to actually getting designed and, you know, in the very near future getting built. And so that is an example of one. Sunset Park, obviously, just down the road from here, is an example of a parks project. Basically, this is an area of the lake that was only annexed into the city back in 2021 as part of the Southeast Interlocal Annexation. So in advance of that, the cities began planning for the infrastructure needs for that. There was, you know, it definitely needed some work. So added that into the comprehensive plan back several years ago as part of the annual docket. Then kind of the initial planning money was allocated, and then through the annual budget, basically necessary improvements are budgeted to actually get the work done. So that went through a planning process, and then renovations were completed last fall. And then another example of city facilities, obviously the police station. There have been a variety of different locations that were examined for the future police station, Chapel Hill, kind of the old fire station. It's kind of, there's been a lot of analysis, but a lot of analysis done for that over the years, a lot of different plans, but similar process where it's incorporated into the 20-year plan and then, you know, identified as a priority through that 6-year CIP. Money is allocated in certain cases, such as the police station, or in the case of the future city hall, there's the opportunity to bond for those projects. So that's a separate process that's basically identified as far as the funding mechanism for that. So those bonds were issued, and then that was occupied, I believe, back in 2021. So we're going to be going through a similar process, you know, as we centralize our kind of a lot of our city services as far as the non-public work services moving down right next to the police station. So that has been something that's been planned and kind of worked its way through the capital facilities plan and into the actual city budget, and then, with the issuance of bonds to help to pay for that. So yeah, those were the major components of the presentation. Happy to touch on anything related to the capital facilities plan. We kind of breezed through that. I would also note that we did include within the packet the draft goals and policies for both the transportation element and the capital facilities elements. We're still currently working on developing the updated chapters for both of those. So any feedback on topics that you'd like to make sure that we incorporate into that. But any comments on specific goals and policies within there? A lot of our focus was on addressing some of the requirements related to equity and sustainability, basically incorporating that into all the different individual elements in advance of adopting a standalone climate change element by 2029. So we've basically been just looking at incorporating those similar to what we've done with other elements that you've reviewed. There are a couple placeholders that you may notice within the transportation element, including a couple where we accidentally left in the comments about the active transportation and the transit levels of service. So we're still working on that. So any input on that, we're happy to incorporate. So with that, happy to kind of let the Planning Commission take the lead. Also, any members of the public are welcome. If you have any questions, come up to the dais there or up to the podium, and happy to entertain any questions between city staff or our consultants. So, yeah.
I have a question just to begin. In 9.3.1, in our packet, transportation and park impact fees shall be periodically updated to ensure they pay a fair share of the cost. It's actually by new development. So there was talk, and there might still be, where you are paying to rent a table or paying to rent a barbecue or paying to on some of the parks that we're doing. I understand the development piece and that there's, we won't get into that because we've done that ad nauseam, but this leaves it open for transportation and park impact fees. Is that to the general public? Or is that to, I guess.
These are referring specifically to development fees, so as a developer comes in.
Development fees,
Yes.
or is it a?
It's not a use fee, it's a development
It's
fee,
not a use fee.
mitigation. So
For park
development pays for,
Development impact fees, maybe. Just to, because there has been public comment on having to, be taxed for a park in your neighborhood and then you get to pay for the privilege of being in it. So I just read that. And then there was nothing, and it's probably intentional, but there was nothing in anything I read that listed the Lake Stevens Sewer District and any of that. So are we keeping that intentionally separate at this point? You were talking about partnering, it's what I'm talking about, yeah, 0.5.3, where we're talking about combining with the utilities, the joining communities, the blah, 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 but Lake Stevens Sewer District was not included in that paragraph.
Yeah, and the sewer district and some of the other special service districts are more so covered in the public services and utilities element, as opposed to within capital facilities. If there is, we can look for some opportunity to, see if any of those would be better suited within the capital facilities element. But this is very much focused, at least at this point, on city facilities, but we can look at some of the language and some of the goals and policies within the utilities and public services element.
Just notice the board process. Thank you.
Just had a question on a piece of terminology here. In 8.1.3, there's the phrase demand management strategy. That's similarly in 8.2.8 traffic demand management. Go over what that is in the context of the stuff.
Cheers.
I can take that one. So demand management would be by providing ways in which to reduce, let's say, like peak demand So alternative transportation, forms of transportation, it could be a strategy, a demand management strategy, or changing, work hours or, different things to basically, manage an operation, an operating transportation system. So that is actually that's actually a requirement of PSRC and the regional transportation plan that the local communities look at those types of mechanisms to reduce the strain and impacts on the system.
One of my soapboxes has been, kind of the incentivization of those kind of things and not the disincentivization of things. So things like bus passes and those kind of things and alternative work schedules, I would view as a positive. When I was looking up what this is, sometimes they have, examples such as toll taxes and parking fees, which I would consider to be disincentivization. And that's one thing that I strongly object to, as a resident, but I think when you hide it inside of something like a phrase like traffic management, it's maybe not as transparent as it could be. But I would that maybe we're clear on what that is. So.
Yeah, I think we are kind of veering towards kind of broad policy language generally, to be able to have those discussions, later in the process, if you were in the city were to, that's kind of, I think, the approach that we have taken. Not necessarily close off and get the state. So that would be to write in more specific about, except for these things, that would be a very specific edit. That would typically occur in this type of setting. So thank you.
So two questions. So one, on these maps, we're showing the city limits versus the UGA. Maybe you can't answer this question. Is there any intention to do any additional annexation? And if so, are we accounting for any of that in any of these projections?
We will do additional annexation, so that will be a goal to annex the remainder of our current urban growth area. We had applied for urban growth area expansions. Those will most likely be denied. They've been recommended for denial every step of the way, so I don't anticipate those moving forward. And those would have to be analyzed. If they were to move forward, those would be analyzed at the time that they're brought into the city. And we have done, at least in the areas that we asked for extensions of our urban growth area, we did do basic traffic analysis, land use capacity, and all of those things.
And then I was just trying to think through times of day other than the evening traffic where we start to have problems. So again, selfishly, full transparency, the docks, the boat launches, right? Summer months, those can get slammed. This whole area with farmers market, right? People are just parked up and down the streets. I'm assuming that's being discussed or at least looked at in terms of the capital improvement opportunities. Yeah, I mean, the boat launch on the other side of the lake, I don't know how old that is. It's not the launch itself, but all of that infrastructure and how we get up and come back through and we're crossing traffic. And I mean, that just is a big mess, can be a nightmare. So I'd be curious to see what we can do to alleviate those type of pinch points. And then my daughter is a senior. She is like running out of school every day just to get to her car so that she doesn't get stuck in 15 minutes of traffic, right? Of all the kids leaving. So, I mean, schools generally, all the elementary school pickups I get is just notoriously a nightmare, but even the high school area, right? What can be done to intersections around there that are simple four-way stop signs, but that just get backed up for 20 minutes and shut down as people are either showing up for school or leaving school, and what can be done for those type of intersections? I don't need an answer now.
I think just about alternative time periods, issues that might bubble to the surface with kind of the standard kind of PM peak hour approach is that the transportation element can include other types of projects that are important to the community to address other issues that might not, come out of kind of the typical evaluation. But I'd also say and I know you weren't speaking to this, but as part of other development impacts, that would be those types of alternate times or kind of minute or very specific detailed impacts would also be addressed as part of the traffic studies that get done as for development. So there are other ways that those things kind of tease out into investments, capital projects. Thank you.
I've got a few comments. Section 845. Do with climate resilient tree trees and other vegetation. That's due to the matter of environment those native species. So on the very next line item, is all strategies, programs, and partnerships to increase carpool transit used by residents and employees. I would like to soften that to have as the goal to provide options rather than to push people to certain directions. Most people don't have an option to carpool or use transit, and if the goal here is to increase by restricting options by pushing people in one direction, that could be detrimental. And the last comment is a few pages later in section 884 talks about the level of service. Reading through that, and I got to letter D, and I laughed out loud. And that is, if the adopted level of service cannot be maintained, then the city will not issue development permits until adopted level of service is changed to allow development. So basically, that D negates the entire paragraph. So, like, we have these goals, and we're going to meet these goals unless we change the goal. So.
Well, I would say that it's a point taken, but that also is what we do as part of the comprehensive plan process, is to look at the level of service. And I would say that maybe that could be rewritten in a way. I think what it means to say is that you could look at level of service again through the comp plan amendment process, but it'd have to be, it's not just for one development or anything like that. It would be, citywide basis.
It's just another issue that there's always exceptions, and people who want to get their thing can always get their thing. They have enough patience or resources.
Yeah, just a couple things. One is on 8.4.2, the electrification of the city's vehicle fleet. I've mentioned this before when it comes to, we're looking at updating HVAC systems within the city a couple of years ago. Just for the language to be modified to, like, as vehicles age out. Doesn't make any sense to get rid of a good truck that has lots of life in exchange for an electric vehicle that's parts that are being mined from central China. So that's, I would like for that to be updated. On 8.3.1, the term equity, so if maybe to change it to equality. Equity makes it seem like we're going to provide more transportation improvements, programs and services in some neighborhoods and not as much in others. So how about we just is equaling everything out? I'm not a fan of the equity term. I would say, yeah, just to equal outcomes for everyone, instead of equitable, like, trying to prop up others. Any other questions or comments? Thank you guys so much. All right, so with that, we'll move on to commissioner reports.
No,
Commissioner Packard,
nothing for me.
Commissioner Davis.
And nothing for me, except that I make a motion that we, put on the record that Commissioner Holt was, not with us this evening, and perhaps that be an excuse.
And nothing as well for me to report. And that leads us to the planning director's report.
No report tonight.
Okay, everybody go again. It can't be that bad.
I'll take it.
We can all think so.
Okay, and with that, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.